Good morning. Good morning. Happy Friday morning. All right. Good morning, everyone. Come join. We're going to be talking about the short term rental. Come join, invite your friends. Hey, how's it
Good.
going?
Good. How are you today?
I am doing good. I'm actually very proud of myself for figuring out how to do this. So,
I'm proud of you too. I'm proud of us.
exactly. Well, Dana, my good friend, I'm glad you're here. People are getting on, and so obviously we're gonna, friends. I want to encourage you. Hey, Freddie, I want to encourage you. Shante, my friend, I want to encourage you guys to share this. We're going to be going over the short-term rental, really the market in New Orleans right now. A lot of things are happening, especially with what came out this week. And so this has always been my source for understanding it. Yeah, I see New Orleans is in the building, y'all. Feel free to share this with your friends. A lot of information we're going to share today. So Dana, let's go ahead and kick it off. Do you want to explain to the people who you are? What do you do? What's your background? All of
I,
that.
I've been a real estate broker for this is my 20th year, and I have been working in the short-term rental space since 2019, right before COVID. So we've had, I started the month before the 2019 short-term rental regulations got in place. So it kind of leveled the playing field here. It was a good time for me to get in. We rode the wave through COVID, and here we are today.
Yeah, man, I always referenced 2019 as kind of like when COVID really, Airbnb really pre-COVID started going toward the height.
Right.
Um, at the end of the day, um, yeah, that was the years that I say everyone and their mom wanted to own an
There were
Airbnb, right?
8,500 Airbnbs in 2019
In the city of New Orleans.
in the city of New
Is that
Orleans.
like the city of New Orleans? Is that Orleans, or is that just the greater New Orleans area? Or
I believe that's Orleans Parish because that's the only one that tracked permitting. Prior to 2019, nobody had a lot of rules on the books, really. It was kind of the wild, wild west for everybody.
so no, yeah, it's a very that was yeah a very crazy time. But all right, so let's talk through some things. Just real quick, you guys, I am not sure how you can access this on a laptop or anything like that, other than just going to Instagram on your laptop. That would be my thought. But let's go ahead, Dan. Let's start off with, so that's your background. You do, a lot of the management, right? That's a lot of your background is in the management for these.
Hmm.
Um, I met you because one of my business partners, you managed his, and whenever I was, either looking at doing some things like that, I am predominantly a long-term rental operator. I do have one furnished, just a midterm rental. You and I have talked about and worked on that one, but that's the extent of it, and it's
Hmm.
definitely not in the city of New Orleans. That's another part. It's over in the suburbs. So, with that being said, this is also though a huge um, conversation, because I see so many real estate agents talking about, hey, this property would be a great Airbnb, but knowing everything that's going on, that we want to make sure that's right. We see, wholesalers or investors being like, hey, it'll be a great Airbnb, but most people are not informed on what that actually means because of all the regulations. So let's talk through that. All right, so I have a list of questions for you. So let's talk about what is happening to short-term rentals in New Orleans right now. What's kind of been the process we've gone through, and then where are we at today?
So yesterday, the Eastern District, was it yesterday or Wednesday? The Eastern District Court um, came down with their ruling that we had been waiting on since December. And there were a couple of amendments that were submitted post December that the judge reviewed. And so the judge basically sided with the city on almost everything. And they have enforced or they upheld the on-site operator requirement.
Okay.
and they have a rule. They've been upheld the one STR per block square, not block face. So a block square is the whole block, the rectangle. You can have two Airbnbs across the street from each other because they're on different block squares. So one STR per residential block square. The city did say that they were going to have a two exception maximum. So if there were two other properties on the same block square, they would use that as, they would permit up to two more properties on the block square under the right circumstances if they met all the other criteria. And the lottery system is back in effect. So
Is the
even if you,
lottery the for the two exceptions? Is that how you, like, let's just say
the,
five, or they do the lottery to find out who those two are?
if you have five STRs on a block and they all submit an application, and it's when they submit the application. So this is like the Oklahoma land rush. If you have an STR, you want to get your application in as soon as possible so you can be in that first lottery.
Mhm.
And then if there's five properties that are up for it, they'll do the lottery, and they're accepting applications on the first week of the month. So like March 1st through 7th, and then they'll have the lottery subsequently after that, shortly after that. They'll approve one of those properties and then maybe two of them if they meet the right criteria. But two people will be left without chairs to sit in.
Okay, it's going to be very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so all of these are previous rules that we've been fighting this battle for years. Let's talk about that. Like, what's that look like? What's your involvement when I know you've been staying up to date for that.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, there's been a lot of back and forth, right? So let's talk through the history up to now part.
Okay. Well, I got in right when they started enforcing the 2019 rules in December of 2019. And we figured that out. We made it work. We operated within the rules. The company that I'm with, we are devoted to being compliant with the rules.
Mhm.
And so we figured it out, and we knew whenever we had people call in and ask for our services, we knew who qualified, who didn't. If they had a potential to get qualified, we would assist them through that. And mainly the lawsuit came about because of the homestead exemption requirement. That was um, the big stickler on that. So we had a new class action filed because of the homestead exemption. They said it was unlawful. It violated interstate
That
commerce.
was at
And they,
federal level, right? So a
right,
federal judge
right,
struck that down and said that you can't basically tell someone that they have to live in New Orleans to have a short-term rental,
right.
um, right? And so they said that that was unconstitutional. They struck it down, and then that's when the city, you know, so okay, keep going.
So the homestead exemption was deemed, I think that it violated interstate commerce. So they, for this new regulation, they said, okay. And I think they've been talking back and forth with the court to try to get guidance on what they can do and what they can't do. And they determined that they could have an owner occupancy requirement or an operator occupancy.
Okay, so like, for example, what does a operator occupancy look like?
Well, an operator can live in one of the rooms. So if you have a 4-bedroom and you have 6 people in a residential or a non-commercial permit, you have a maximum of 6 people that can be in there. So if you have 4 bedrooms, you can have an operator live in 1 bedroom, and the other 3 bedrooms you rent out. There's a lot of people that don't want to have a stay with their family with the owner or operator of the
Right.
property.
You want to
And
rent the whole house.
and
Yeah.
nor does the operator. I mean, there are some people who love this and do. I've met a lot of great people through this process
Right.
that are renting out rooms, and they love it. And it is a great way to see, whenever I travel internationally, I like to go stay in neighborhoods where I know how the people live. I don't want to just get the tourist experience. And so I get that. Um, so there are a lot of people who do that. Personally, we don't rent out partial rooms
Okay.
at my company. So we don't take those on, but there's a lot of people who do that. So that's what they're saying is you have to have an operator on site. You could, moving forward, maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but moving forward, you could have a double, and you could have a tenant on one side that you designate as an operator and have the other side for um, guests and do that short-term rental. But then you got to hit that block square requirement.
Right.
So,
So there's a lot of if this then that, if this then that type situations. Okay.
yeah.
So all right. So ultimately, what's is this stuff that's happening in other cities in America, like what we're seeing here? Like what can you say to that?
Austin, in Austin, the plaintiffs prevailed, not the city. And so I was a little surprised that we didn't see more of the Austin precedents brought in on this one. New York City banned STRs altogether. They have had a little bit of a real estate crisis there because all the short-term rentals were then put on. They're either operating illegally or they are doing midterm rentals, which I hear midterm rental probably 40 times a week when I talk to people. And everybody, and I do
Saturation
suggest,
here. Yeah.
yeah. And New Orleans has a very vibrant medical community. We have the infrastructure to support midterm rentals, and we have the infrastructure to support like furnish finders. My company is going to be getting into midterm rentals soon. We're trying to do that by the end of the year. Um, but I, even with our huge infrastructure of a health community here, a medical community, that at some point you're going to get
Yeah.
saturated. Like, how many traveling nurses are there?
Well,
Or,
and let's talk about that. So I have a family member that is a nurse, and so we've kind of talked about some of these things. The one furnished rental I have is a midterm rental, and so you generally most people think traveling nurses, but it's also corporate clients, right?
right.
So like right now in my unit is a someone who's relocated as a district manager for a retail store, and they've stayed there. They're on their second month. Well, in
Mm-hmm,
3 days they will start their second month,
mm-hmm,
and they're house shopping, right? Their families, they're in, and mine's a 3 bedroom house with a yard and a fenced yard and a garage, right?
mm-hmm.
So they're house shopping, all that stuff, right? So that's great.
Well, we
Most
talked
people,
about that
yeah,
before because, like, there are insurance companies. If
yep,
somebody has a disaster at their house, they need a place to live. Whenever I was in between houses, I sold my house like this, but then weren't able to get in our new house right away. And so, yeah, there's a lot of other opportunities for that. I think most people are counting on
the
I
travel.
hear traveling nurses more than
Well,
anything.
so going back to my original point, I've got a family member who's,
Mm,
and what we talked about, and it's funny, I dated a travel nurse at one time, and I remember they were making bank. Like I remember it. That wasn't why I was dating them, but I remember hearing it and being like, okay, but it is not that case anymore. So
mm,
they used to, like in the height of COVID, there was, and this is where the traveling nurses, it was I would say it's cool to a degree. I'm not saying it's not prevalent. It's just I think a lot of people have to realize what I have started to realize is, a lot of these travel nurses, they're an opportunity, but at the same time, you're very right that saturation is a
mhm.
can become a thing.
And during
So
COVID, people they were working remotely. Now companies are calling people back into the brick and mortar,
mhm,
and we're not. I think that this generation, this younger generation, is going to demand remote work. So there's going to be a tension there. But during COVID, people were working remotely. So yeah, we had record years in 2021, and 2022 was a boom. It was great. But those days are gone. 2023, we were down 12% across the New Orleans region
Yeah.
for short-term rentals.
And that's occupancy. Okay. So, well, I wanted to kind of see what is the now going back to New Orleans. What is the argument against short-term rentals? Like, what are we hearing basically with like the argument against what we had prior?
They are the number one argument that I heard whenever I was sitting in, and I went to all of the hearings that they had
So, like all the stuff,
until
council, all of that stuff for
every time city council met. I went to a couple of city planning meetings, went to the city council meetings. I heard affordable housing more than anything there.
Mhm.
I there was an affordable housing lobby that was extremely active during this time.
I know the lot.
And it was to the point that they created an Instagram page and they would record owners as they were speaking in front of council. And then they'd have to state their name and address. So they would look them up and do background check and see who they really were. And then they would put them and their recording on their Instagram page and bash them on the Instagram page. It was
Wow.
cutthroat.
Wow.
I don't
And
roll
that
like that, but
well,
they do.
but I mean, I could see that hindering, um, owners wanting to go to the city council meetings and, all of that,
I
right? Um,
I asked another platform manager why they weren't saying anything or speaking, and they said if I get up and speak, I'll put a target on my back.
look, and this was one of those things that I can totally understand that I went to some city council meetings, especially whenever they were doing the Healthy Homes initiative, and we met at that lobby. I met that lobby there. I went up and spoke. I already have a platform, being on the radio each weekend and various things like that. But oh man, the oh yep, I got the target. I understand that part. So two questions for you based off of this from the audience. Harris Robertson said, "What about hotels?" Um, that's often a talking point, is that hotels are lobbying against Airbnbs because of the competition and how it's
The
stealing.
hotel lobby was at every single meeting, and their argument is that the people who work in the hotels don't it takes them an hour and a half bus ride to get to work because there's no affordable housing around like the French Quarter and where they work.
Yes, so that
So
argument. Well, and that's one of the other arguments is, New Orleans is a huge tourism industry, right? And so a huge part of that is that the French Quarter, Bourbon Street, Jackson Square, all of that. People are saying, hey, look, there's no affordable housing there. That is prime real estate. Wherever there's prime real estate, there is never going to be affordable housing. Why? The same reason why you, those places cannot be bought for $100,000, right?
mhm,
The same reason that the property taxes are not small,
mhm.
right? So, okay, second question. You are a broker.
Let
Well,
me
if you
say
want
one
to,
thing. I
yeah,
want to address one thing about the hotel. And this may be a little, I would argue that instead of the hotels shutting down or arguing against short-term rentals because it affects affordable housing, I would say if they have people that are working back-to-back shifts, why not let them have a room? I was in hotel industry for a period of time, and I do know that they do keep rooms for people who work there if they have occupancy. That's all I'm going to say.
no, no, look that no, look, it's fair, right? It's fair, but at the same time, I do think that there's a level of what's the word? Less free market, more let's see what we can throw our money behind,
Right,
right?
right.
So okay, second question here. Ron asked, what did the Realtor Association have to say? You're a licensed broker.
I
Do you? Yeah. What did that look like?
So So I spoke with the, because we've had a little bit of a turnover at the local board, and I spoke
Yep.
briefly with the former people, and they were like, we're just kind of waiting to see what happens. And I'm like, well, we do need some more education where agents know how to navigate short-term rental. Short-term rental in in Louisiana, in the licensing, in my opinion, has been a little bit of the black sheep. Like, regulated. We are regulated by the Louisiana Real Estate Commission. And I spoke with a couple of commissioners about this. I've notified them, and they are like, well, we really don't know quite yet what to do about this because it's a municipal. And they said we have to go a different way to take this to the state level. I approached them because I felt like the having an operator occupancy creates agency. So if you have somebody that you have hired to live in your house
Yep.
to represent you with a guest, they are now, that forms agency. So now, are you going to have all these operators in homes that aren't licensed agents?
So, so Dina, that is a fantastic point. So the requirement that there has to be an operator on site. So, for example, your tenant in next door in your duplex, or someone living in one of the rooms, it's yourself or someone else. How do you know they're not violating fair housing? How do you know they're not doing everything? Because it could be, the maid for all you know, right? Like they don't know. And so you're right. So, because for anyone to manage properties for other people
Mm-hmm.
in the state of Louisiana, it is a requirement that you have to be licensed, right? And so, but yet they're deeming that an operator can live on site, yet it doesn't have to be the owner. So therefore,
The owner can represent
it,
themselves. You
it
know, you
yeah,
you sell property, the owner can represent themselves. They're not doing anything wrong. But if they hire somebody or if they give somebody a rental discount to represent them, there's agency there, and they're who's going to regulate that? Really, and if you look at the Louisiana real estate law, it falls under property management, but it's really there's no compartmentalization between short-term rental property management and property management for long-term rentals. And I think that we're past due to get some more clarity from our real estate commission on those regulations. And then, then the city would have to fall in line because state law supersedes municipal law. But in a lot of and we talked about like a lot of these, what was in if you read the 55-page court decision, it talks about that the Constitution has given this over to municipal law. So they're turning this over, letting every municipality come up with their own rules and regulations.
got it. I
And
um
let's talk, I want to I want to park this, but let's talk about San Diego in a minute when we talk about moving forward.
well, no, let for sure. Well, okay, so a lot of good points here. What I find is that a lot of associations are either proactive or reactive. And so I'm hearing that there's a lot of both going on, right?
Mhm.
And I think you bring up some good points. Look, long-term rentals and short-term rentals are a world apart, and even everything from your eviction laws, right? The nature of your contracts, the nature of your management agreements, right? Like all of those things are completely different. And so I always tell investors, so I'm not a licensed agent. I don't pretend to be one. I collaborate with a lot. I educate a lot of them. But I always say, look, investors, be careful of yes people. Oh yeah, I can do that for you. But yet if they're not, if they don't know what they're doing, I mean, you
Yes, people will agree to your destruction.
there you go. So let's talk about this. All right. So we talked about, the arguments for affordable housing. I'll say this, you don't have to say this, but I will say that my thought here is by 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 greatly limiting short-term rentals does not automatically equal affordable housing.
No.
It just doesn't, especially right now. So if you guys have been following me on Instagram, I want to encourage you, first of all, feel free, if you're new here, feel free to follow along, follow Dana. But at the end of the day, I have been very vocal that Louisiana is in an insurance crisis right now. Property taxes are being reassessed for 2024. That is another nail in the coffin for affordable housing. And so there's a lot of things that property owners, whether we like it or not, we're being forced to not like we're being forced to not to be able to charge affordable rates. I just sat across from a woman who owns a ton of rental properties. She was wanting to sell. She owns them free and clear. Okay, she's been doing this since 1967.
Hmm.
She has a lot of rental properties in New Orleans. She said, Courtney, I used to always work with people. Oh baby, oh baby, your brother died. Okay, look, your brother who's your roommate, let's knock it down $200 a month until someone can move in with you, right? Like working with people. And I'm a believer of knowing when to make the right call, when to have a backbone, when to make the right call. And she said, Courtney, I can't no more. I can't. Not with insurance, not with property taxes, not with the cost of stuff, right? And this is someone who owns them free and clear, not someone with a mortgage, right? So nonetheless, and that's who I always had pointed people for. If you want affordable housing, go find mom and pop landlords. Because a lot, especially if they've owned them for a long time, free and clear, because they can work with you. But let me pull back. My point was, it does not automatically equal, right? I think it's going to have, there's going to be a lot of unintended consequences with it.
Mm.
So with that being said, let's be very clear. Our short-term rentals dead 100% in New Orleans right now.
They're in ICU.
Okay. So in the
They're
ICU, like they're circling the drain.
the on-site operator requirement is a major hurdle for most people. The one per block rule is that's going to sting. There are going to be people who lose, and then what are the losers going to do? A lot of people acquired these properties for the sole purpose of renting it out, short-term rental, and they can't afford to live there without that revenue. Um, I will say that if you purchase a property for investment in the city of New Orleans, there is so much due diligence required. And if you intend to do it short-term rental, you need to make sure. I wouldn't take it for granted that your realtor or the listing agent is accurate about the zoning. I would call the city of permits myself and make sure that I qualify for a permit. You can look at you can look up the addresses on the block square around a property you're considering. You can do that on the onestopapp.gov and look that up and see if there's other permits on your block square. I would do that, and I would call them and say, do you have any applications pending? And you can't apply for a permit until you're the owner of the property, and anything could happen in that time.
Right.
And if you and this is one of the biggest myths. The permit does not transfer with the owner for non-commercial properties.
So if it's zoned
If
residential,
if
so
it's residential, I can't take over your permit. I'm not buying your permit. I'm buying your property. It's like getting a driver's license. You have to go apply for that permit yourself. Now, on commercial properties, or you can, if they're in an LLC, the LLC can be the owner of the asset and you can transfer the LLC.
yep.
But if you have a lot of properties wrapped up in one LLC, then you got to peel some off if you're just wanting to
Right.
get rid of
Or
one.
if you have debt tied to it with a personal guarantee, like
Yeah.
there. So I have purchased LLCs before. Me personally, as a creative real estate investor, and I promise you, there's a lot of risk to that. Most people don't know how to properly buy an LLC versus buying, let's just say, just an asset, right? And so there's a lot of issues there. That's more advanced. People don't know how to do, general due diligence in the first place, much less on an entity. All right. So,
This is a
uh,
great time to say my disclaimer. I'm not a CPA. I'm not an attorney.
right.
Anything I say here today, please check with your CPA. Please check with your attorney. A
Yeah.
good plug for one of the, I know you use Arena sometimes. I use Arena Collective. I think they would be excellent with
Well,
this.
and so here's a huge thing. So for those of you, a lot of you guys have been joining. So Dana, real quick, reintroduce yourself at this moment for people who have just joined and whatnot.
I'm Dana MacCord. I'm a 20-year real estate broker in the state of Louisiana. I am currently the managing broker for Vacasa, Louisiana. I also have my own brokerage because Vacasa doesn't do buy sell. So I have Golden Rule Realty.
And so you do property management for short-term rentals. You have always been my source for information for as this has been going on. So New Orleans has had a rocky background with short-term rentals. So you're saying short-term rentals are not dead; they're in the ICU, right? A huge thing is this is specifically speaking to investors. Now, if it's the home you live in, let's say you bought a duplex and you want to rent out the other side, yes, that's something where it's like it's you primarily purchased it for a an owner occupied primary residence, and you want the benefit of a short term rental. You still have to get through all those hurdles, right?
Mhm,
You
mhm.
still have to qualify for the one block rule. You still, all of those things. And so I think it's going to drastically reduce the specifically, the straight, um, just pure investment folks on the residential side. So they're going to let's talk through. So right here, let's talk about what do you see people pivoting to. So if the traditional short-term rental in New Orleans is it's in ICU as you said, it's struggling, and I absolutely see that. What do you see people pivoting
Well,
to?
we kind of alluded to this earlier. When you purchase a property, do your due diligence, have multiple exit strategies, multiple investment strategies. So if you can't do short-term rental, you still have to, if you're going to do midterm rental, you still have to furnish a property for like a 2 or 3 bedroom house. And like people, let's just be honest, people are looking at photos whenever they're booking a property. And so if you source it with thrift store, old furniture, and it's not well curated, you're going to be on the lower end of a range. If I give you a quote for short-term rental revenue projections,
Yep.
if you go to the high end of the range for a 3 bedroom, you're probably going to be spending about 25 grand, maybe 20 to 30,000 to completely stock the property with what short-term rental guests want and need. If you don't want to do that, then you've invested that for a midterm rental. You're going to make less money, but you're going to have a little bit more security, but you might have wide gaps of occupancy there. Or you can do a long-term rental, which is the lowest revenue out of these three that we're talking about.
Right.
And then you're fighting your insurance is going up and all of the regulations that the city has for property managers and landlords now.
Yep.
And so you have to really crunch your numbers and give yourself some
Right.
margin. And
Most New Orleans landlords on a long-term rental are struggling to cash flow,
right,
period, right now.
right.
Just because, for those of you who don't know, Louisiana's in an insurance crisis. For example, I've got a duplex in Orleans Parish worth 155, 175. Our insurance for fire, liability, wind, hail, and flood, 8,500 a year.
Mhm.
It rents for 1,000 aside, right? And so there's a level there that, and the majority of that is the wind and hail. That's a whole different topic, but most people don't realize it's just like a lot of people can't, on the long term rental side, they can't necessarily afford
Mhm.
that level of revenue. So what do? They said, how can I get higher revenue? Therefore, looking at furnishing it, putting midterm, furnishing it for short term. But with all these rules, we're also seeing people who started at short term and they're coming down,
Mhm.
right? They're cycling down to those other strategies. I think the people most at risk are those who bought for a short term rental and they did not run. They speculated heavily, and they did not run the numbers if it would work for a midterm or for a long term. And those are the people who are either going to live in the Wild Wild West illegally and illegally operate, or they're gonna have to sell. And
Right.
most of them, with where the market is right now, they may not be able to sell without being underwater,
Right.
depending on how they bought.
Right.
Um, so let's talk through number four. The fourth question I had for you was because all of this has taken some time to go through the courts. What have you seen with owners in the market since all this has started, and what are you seeing now?
Just like what we've been talking about, they're selling a lot. Like, I'm in a couple of Airbnb owners Facebook groups, which is a really good source of information, and it's a good community. If you do decide to do a short-term rental, you should join one of those Facebook communities in New Orleans specifically to keep in touch with what's going on. They're really good at sharing information, but a lot of people are just battle worn. And the sad thing is these are the law-abiding citizens.
Mhm.
The
The
you
ones who
have
wanted, who cared enough to
who
join, and
cared enough to join, but they cared enough to try to be compliant with the permit process. And did we run this number earlier when we were talking? As of December, there were 6,500 Airbnbs listed in New Orleans, but only 1,060 permits in December of 2023. So you have 5,500, is that right? 5,500 illegal operated short-term rentals. But the city, they have AI software now. There was a moratorium from the court on enforcement during this period while this was being decided, but they're going to ramp up now.
yeah.
Um,
Now that
they're,
the verdict has come out, it's official that their rulings are upheld, and they can then and start enforcing. Yeah.
they can start enforcing, and they have the software to do it. It scans VRBO, it scans Airbnb, and it scans the city's permit office. So they know what addresses have permits or not, and they're going to go after them. Now, in the meetings, I don't think that there has been anything decisive about what is going to happen. They talked about a lot of things like putting a hold, like having your utilities shut off. I don't know if they can legally do that or not.
Right.
They had talked about giving each property a citation, so you wouldn't be able to sell your property without paying that lien.
Yeah. Yeah. That it's going to be very interesting to see what enforcement looks like, on top of, does the city have the manpower to do that?
Yeah.
So that's a whole thing. All right. So then, how do you think this will continue to impact our market? What's the good and the bad? Like, what does it look like moving forward?
Um, Gosh, it is like my crystal ball. I said this about 6 months ago. My crystal ball broke in the middle of this. It really did. I used to be a pretty good prognosticator, but not so. I mean, it's really hard. I think that I think we are going to see a little bit more enforcement. There is going to be some kerfluffle with that. There's going to be a lot of people who put their property on the market, already have. If you go on Facebook Marketplace, you see short-term rental liquidation sales all the time
Like,
in there.
people selling all the furniture. They're
It's
like,
sad.
whole house
Yeah,
full of furniture.
right,
Yeah.
right. I think that we'll see people who try to do rentals, or they try to rent by the room, or they try to do midterm. And, we're in the free market. So whatever the market can bear, whatever works with them, and like how much, it's just what that individual, what they already have leverage, what can they bear? How
Right.
can they financially withstand that? I think it's probably going to be a good opportunity. I think we may see home prices go down a little bit if all these come on the market.
Um,
Um,
apart from this happening, New Orleans already has been, they saw a drop last year, and it's already predicted based on the data to have another drop this year, in price volumes. And this is both, this is from multiple sources, with with everything going on in New Orleans.
mhm.
Again, this is another nail in a coffin for property owners in New Orleans. And let me say this: maybe some of you saying, Courtney, I don't own a short term rental, but you don't realize, or maybe you're a real estate agent, you don't realize how this impacts other assets, impact the market in general.
Mhm. Well, it's going to impact tourism because if you reduce the pool of short-term rentals, it's going to increase the price of hotels.
Mm-hmm.
So tourism is going to be more expensive. You know, when you think about like who who's our typical guest comes to New Orleans, it's a lot of it is people who come for bachelor parties. That was one of the reasons we talked a little bit about, like, why did the city go after short-term rentals? And part of it was the parties that were going on in neighborhoods. They're trying to preserve the quality of life for the residents who live there. And but it is going to, like, when you have a family of, if you have 5 kids and a mom and a dad, you can't stay in a short-term rental unless it's a commercial short-term rental. They can still do 5 bedrooms, but you have a maximum occupancy of 6 if you have a legal or if you have a short-term rental that you're operating. So it's going to affect how people travel. you know Not as many people can gather around a meal in one house,
Well,
so it's
I know I prefer staying, when I travel at Airbnbs as well. And so there's a lot of reasons with it. We talked about the Super Bowl in New Orleans next year. So I mean, and it's at the beginning of Mardi Gras. That's going to be very interesting to see. Now, so one of the, I guess you could say, unintended consequences, maybe it's a positive, is the commercially zoned properties that are doing this right. There's going to be demand for those potentially, right? What do you think on that?
um, now that this has been settled, the city is probably going to turn their attention to commercial permits. They have already
They
uh,
previously
hinted
tried after it. Yep.
they have already hinted that they're going to do that. The 55-page document that came out on Wednesday alludes to the differences between commercial and residential or non-commercial. And so they said for residential, these things don't apply, but for commercial, they do. So commercial is somewhat protected by the commerce laws. So I think commercial will, but the zoning is up to the city. The
Right.
city can change zoning, and that's how they're going to get their way with whatever they want to do.
And
And so HUMU is on the bubble because there was an entity that said that they were going to build affordable housing. They asked for a zoning variance to HUMU. They ended up building what they said was for affordable housing, went to short-term rental, and
like an entire block.
the city didn't like that, and that's why they're coming down on. They're doing a study on HUMU because they see HUMU. There's a lot of HUMU that is in the periphery of the French Quarter, and so they're wanting that to be affordable housing. So that is who is going to be in the crosshairs next.
Yeah.
So
So I mentioned earlier, you and I met because one of my business partners that I own properties with, he has a property that he owns that is zoned commercial. It's a triplex, a block off of St. Charles. It is surrounded by a daiquiri shop. What is that? There's a tailor or something right next door to it. A gas station across the way. I think
the
an abandoned,
urgent care,
the urgent
post
care,
office.
yeah, all of that. And when they were wanting to ban short-term rentals and commercial properties, he said, seriously, you want to turn this triplex into residential and it's surrounded by all of these businesses? Like, at the end of the day, like, this is who you're threatening with, you know what I mean? And like, he did a great job by showing a video, doing a video of it, going out there in front of his unit and then sending that to the council to say, look, this is and so the way that he operates is 2 of his units are long-term rentals, and then the one is short-term. Is that what's required?
Well, he's commercial,
Yep.
so right now he is fine.
Would he
That I would,
could
if
he
you have
do
a
all
commercial,
three? Could he? I'm sorry, not to cut you off. Could he do all three as a short-term rental if he wanted to?
I think he could.
But it would be a matter of permits, right?
It would, well, they're not issuing any new permits even for commercial right now because the city and Planning and Zoning Commission has been tasked with doing a commercial study. That's why they're next.
Mm-hmm.
And they're in the middle, they're doing that study. So when that study is published, then and they're digesting that and they get through this, that's when the new commercial rules will roll out.
Yeah. So I think we knew that residential was first. And now that we see what is shaken out, do you think there'll be appeals? I don't know if you can speak to that. What do you know?
I don't know. I don't know why not. I mean, there might be appeals. It hasn't gone as high as it could. I don't know how mad everybody is. And there's a lot of people who didn't get in on one class action lawsuit, so they may start another one. I mean, who knows?
Right.
But
It'll be interesting to see. So, okay, let's talk about you've mentioned that you guys are going to be pivoting. What does that look like for you guys? So, as a short-term rental property management company, what does that look like?
we are, right now, we are focused on, because everybody, they had a non-enforcement period, but they weren't renewing or taking any new applications. So right now, our focus is on getting all of our owners compliant and if their permits expired during the moratorium, we're getting them updated ASAP. And we're making sure that no permits lapse. If you have a commercial permit and it lapses, you are out of luck.
Yeah.
So you got, if you have a permit and if you have a property manager, don't leave it up to them to do it. It is your responsibility
Yeah.
to make sure that you are timely on your permits. So we are meeting weekly to see how this shakes out. We do have a new product available in the New Orleans market, where if somebody is compliant with their residential permit or a commercial permit, then we can do just the online platform management, and we're not running like the on the ground management. So we're not doing any local
Like
yeah,
partial, right? Like we're
right, right,
managing the tenant facing
right.
versus.
And we handle all like the taxes. We collect the taxes from the guest and we pay the city on the owner's behalf.
Okay.
We pay the owner for the housekeeping, and the homeowner secures their own housekeeping. It's pretty sophisticated because everybody uses an app and we have smart locks. That's another thing that something that happened in the middle of all this is that there were people checking into short-term rentals for one night. If it didn't have a code that reset itself, they were selling the code on the black market, and people were squatting all over the city. And so that was like a whole thing.
Wow. I didn't
As a
know.
property manager, you deal with stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
property management. We call it the thrill of management. So Dana, as we start to wrap up here, are there any other thoughts, anything else that you want to say um, about the topic of short-term rentals in New Orleans? Because a lot's changing, and investors and agents need to know. And agents, if you're listening, Dana needs to be a resource that you reach out to. Investors as well. At the end of the day, and we'll share your contact info here in a second too. But any other thoughts?
I would just navigate these waters very carefully. Make sure you have multiple exit strategies. Um, if you, we didn't really go into hotel licenses, but hotel licenses are a way to go if you can get a property that qualifies for a hotel license.
Is that multifamily stuff?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, uh, do your due diligence. Don't leave it up to your agent. And I am a resource for agents. If you want to come to me and ask questions, I'll do that. If I don't know the answer, I will find it out. I want us all to be more educated. I'm an investor too. I understand the pain of whenever something doesn't work out the way you thought it was going to. And I think that we are all in the Orleans Parish, we're in a little bit of a pickle right now.
Yeah.
And we just kind of need to, I always look at George Bailey and It's a Wonderful Life. They all held together and they became a community and helped each other out through a really rough time. And I think that's what it's required here.
Look, absolutely. Dana, you've always been my biggest resource on the topic, and so I've
Thank
always
you.
appreciated that. How can people reach out to you? How can they, reach out to you to either do business with you or just get in touch with you? What are ways for people to reach out to you?
If you want to follow me on Instagram and just tag me on here, and then and let me know you're interested in more information. If you want to drop your phone number and a message, I can get back to you and give you all my contact information and
Mhm.
offer more resources that you need.
Yeah, excellent. So send her a direct message on Instagram at Dana MacCord. So the other last thing, guys, look, this is an ever changing topic. Um, so it's really important that you stay informed and informed for people who actually know what's going on, right? I get people all the time, especially people who either are not used to investment properties or not local. They're like, oh, yeah, it could be a great short term rental. And I'm like, you know, like what rock are you living underneath right now? Like, type of thing. But all right. So with that being said, Dana, thank you so much for sharing your time. Everyone, thanks so much for joining. A lot of you guys joined throughout the duration of this. But hey, I appreciate it. Make sure you guys give Dana a follow. And I'm looking forward to some more of these lives, guys. This was my first official one. So Dana, thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Courtney. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Great. You guys have a great Friday and see you guys soon.
Bye.
Thanks.